What's a local rumor you heard as a kid that turned out to be true years later? Girl in my high school was rumored to have been dating one of the teachers who was married. This was probably true because after graduation, the teacher had retired, divorced his wife and married the girl. I wonder if that's the same school where my wife taught, because she told me a similar story about a teacher who had been in her school. I feel like you'd be hard-pressed to find a high school where that hadn't happened at some point. Yeah, basically these are stock characters by now, along with the lesbian women's basketball coach and the grumpy, apathetic shop teacher. My shop teacher was amazing. He inspired me to become an engineer. He fought to bring a robotics program into my school and encouraged me and others to become engaged and have fun learning. I learned that I succeed much better when I get my hands on practical problems than theoretical ones, and he was one of my all-time favorite teachers. He sadly passed away entirely too young of cancer about a decade ago. I think about him often. I was able to tell him how much he helped and inspired me, though, and I'm glad I got to share that with him. I wrote a whole personal letter about it. I was fortunately able to catch up with him a few times before he passed. He was the opposite of grumpy and apathetic. So many good shop teachers that I heard of from the 90s through early aughts were like this. Basically applied engineering at its best. I often think that if my science and maths teachers had been crap, and my humanities teachers good at their job, I would have a totally different life and career. Thank FSM for YouTube so I can catch up now. My 9th grade shop teacher smoked weed in his back office. He was really laid back, obviously LOL. It's a trope for a reason. But it sounds like you got a good one. We just toured a school where the shop teacher sounds a lot like yours. He was hyper-engaged and really into getting the kids to think like an engineer. Sure, I had one good shop teacher. But all the others were the stereotype. One was so lazy that he had us read and write reports on the history of technology and shit like that instead of doing actual shop work. This older kid had this lightning streak scar all over one side of his neck and down his body. The rumor was he was throwing stuff at the power lines behind our neighborhood. Turns out he was. He was throwing copper wire at it, and it arced. He's lucky to be alive. You're a moron, Harry. I'm a what? I thought you were well-grounded. He was the leader of the resistance. We had a guy try to climb a high-voltage line and ended up losing his arm. And that's how he got the nickname Sparky. I'd call him Lucky because that usually ends in death. I'd call him Ampy because the amp up got him an amputation. Also knew a guy named Sparky in my youth. He earned his name because he liked to set things on fire. Last I heard, he was doing 10 years for arson. Well-earned name, I'd say. Only fella I knew who'd done time for arson ended up being a city councilman. When I knew him, he was an author, actor, and activist against clerical sex abuse. Before he was an arsonist, he'd been in the care of the Christian Brothers. It's a fairly significant miracle that he's such a lovely man these days, although I gather he's not popular as a city councilman. Upgrade to Bernie. Doctor in town, who was a huge football booster, gave prescription painkillers to high school kids. He passed away before it all came to light, so he never saw justice. Lots and lots of kids through the years unsurprisingly became addicted. What is a football booster? They donate money and then get to have a say about the football team's activities and such. Think of the millionaire/billionaire donors for elections, but high school football. I can't imagine the kind of person who would invest that much money into a high school team, except perhaps to have access to dozens of teenagers, and I can't imagine a good reason for that. I'm from a small southern town and our mayor was one. He just loved football and had played in his day, but he had no kids that played. So every Thursday, for JR High, and Friday, for high school, he was out on the sideline with his towels and water cups for the players. He was just in it for the love of the game. He'd help clean up after the game and then wave to everyone and go home. He also helped fund uniforms for the players and the bandstand so that we didn't get wet if it started raining during the game. He also helped make sure the band got what we needed because he said you couldn't have a football team without a good marching band, lol. He's dead now, but he was a good egg. It's not always with ill intent. Many people who donate their time or money to high school athletics are alumni of the school or are parents of children who attend. There are obviously bad apples in every batch, though. It's a lot more prevalent in college than it is in high school. Oil mogul T. Boone Pickens is a huge booster to University of Oklahoma. The guy that owns the Flying J truck stop chain donates millions to University of Tennessee every year. The list goes on. If they're alumni and turned out millionaires, throwing some pocket change at their old high school team would be an obvious feel-good thing to do. High school football is a very big deal in some areas, particularly the southern U.S. There are high school teams in Texas that play in 15,000-seat stadiums. It's a way of life there. It's not as bad as it sounds. Plenty of times the high school football team is just the biggest community-building thing in a smaller town. There's definitely bad people like anywhere else though. Nah. Donating to help your local community is the sign of a good person. Sports programs are an important part of growing up, if they are run well, for kids/young adults. Taking part and helping fund those things are the sign of a good person. Why someone would choose the local football program instead of a music program or art program, etc., will have more to do with who they and the community are and find important than anything else. It's just a fun way for rich sports fans to give back to their communities. Football boosters are huge in Texas. Some high schools have fields that hold 10,000 plus people and they're full for every single high school football game. With NIL deals coming in for high school players now, there is big money in it for players and boosters alike. It's all a FING racket. I grew up in a town that was growing quickly, but still had real small-town politics. The three biggest boosters to our football team carried a ton of power, and their sons were on the team with me. Two were ass, but got to start and play anyways, one of which was playing in front of two much better players. The other one was a great athlete and would have been a star anyways, but he got away with everything. Most of the time it's just local parents that really do care about the football team. My high school football team's booster club was awesome. They fed us the day before games, they fed us after games, they bought us seriously sick equipment. Rich farmers like football, and they wanted us to win. Gambling? Pretty decent reason. There was a show called Friday Night Lights that showed a lot of it. Go to any high school and you will see small business banners that were paid for. Some might not care, but most are owned by alumni and want to see the team win. U.S. Midwest. Rumor has it that way up the old road out of town, somewhere in the woods, was a satanic cult that held seances and other mystical rituals by firelight. Scared the willies out of us kids, and our parents wouldn't let us ride our bikes anywhere on that road. Decades later, I was working on a commissioned history project for the town and talked to the old man who owned the oldest homestead in the county way back in the woods along that road. While photographing the creek that ran through the stone foundation basement of the home, which the settlers used for water generations ago, I noted the burned-out tea candles everywhere. Guy lit up and said yeah, back in his younger days he and his wife used to host elaborate costume parties at the property, often by candlelight for the fun of it. He'd heard the rumors of the satanic cult and thought it was hilarious, so he and his friends ran with it and held parties in monks' robes and had bonfires and lived it up. He still laughs about it, and now, so can I. We had something similar. There was an abandoned boarding school that had been built in the 1890s or so and abandoned sometime in the 1980s. Local teens, though devil worshippers, had taken it over and were performing rituals there because of the creepy vibe and because of the graffiti, pentagons and inverted crosses and stuff. There were also stories about kids exploring at night and hearing the devil worshippers coming. The graffiti was just graffiti, and the noises people heard were just multiple groups exploring the building at the same time. The city restored the building and turned it into a library. Are you in Utah? Yup. I worked at the library until right before they moved into the building. One persistent rumor that went around during high school was that one of our biology teachers was having sex with students. We all thought it was a joke because the guy was rather ugly looking and we all knew his wife, a fellow teacher, was always around. Years pass and I find out that the male teacher was found having several relationships with underage students. He got arrested, divorced, put on the SO registration, and lost custody of his kids. Our biology teacher married a student a year after she graduated. She just started showing up to faculty events with her new husband, making it weird for her former teachers. The rumor was they were messing around before she graduated, but no one could prove it. Same thing at my high school with a gym coach. Why does it always seem to be the gym teacher? Probably because they're the teacher with the best excuse for physically touching a student. Same thing happened with my math teacher in high school. I was friends with the girl he was pursuing too. She was 2 grades above me. At the time I thought it was fine. I was even a little jealous because he was so charming. We even ended up going to his house for many D&D sessions after we had all graduated. Weird times. Gym, coaches, and band are fairly unique in that they have excuses for more individualized contact with students, combined with seeing the same student for multiple years. We had a lesbian gym coach that used to molest the girls. It took everyone way too long to realize that women could do it too. Yep, same thing happened in my hometown. I felt really bad for her husband though because he was one of my teachers. This is a little more lighthearted. But when I was in elementary school, probably like 3rd grade, all the kids in my class would joke about how our primary teacher and our Spanish teacher liked each other. We were all little kids, so of course it was just dumb little kids joking about around. That is, until a few years later when I was in middle school and I found out my old teacher and Spanish teacher recently got married. This was a wholesome reply, lol tie. Finally a marriage not involving a student. This was before they became a throuple. Yeah, I'm going to stop with this one. Too many stories about sex offenders. Please like and subscribe for more daily content.